The illustrious Jaffa bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine.
Here we come. Hey, this is Dave Negri, your co-host, or one of your co-hosts at Contractor Secret Weapon.
And this is Pete Mitchell, your other co-host at Contractor Secret Weapon. And this is going to be a special, at least I'm hoping this is going to be a carryover podcast for one of the other podcasts I do, which is called Church Planter Podcast. For all of you contractors who are like, well, what in the world is that? These are typically pastors who are starting churches, not building churches like the building, but they're starting the congregation, if you will. So it's a crossover episode because you and I have known each other for years, and we've talked about this stuff for a long time. And you've had a really a big burden and a passion for really seeing how business can be treated as ministry for those of you who are listening, who are Christians, and you're like, hey, I want to serve God in my business. How can I do that? And it's not really something that in our society is seen as like, okay. It's almost like, well, you either are a pastor and you work like literally in a ministry, or you're in the world, right? You're secular. We got all these great terms in the Christian vernacular. So I want to just start it off kind of with that thought. Dave, what are your initial thoughts on this subject?
Wow. Well, I know that I've been on a bunch of your mastermind calls with the bivocational pastors. And, you know, one of the things that I hope, and I really hope, is that the bivocational pastors, you know, you're teaching them how to create income through business of their own. And I look at it as a double blessing, really, in a sense. And I've talked to my pastor about this too, because we sort of think on the same level, even though that he is a pastor and that's his job, and he knows that there's a huge disconnect between business owners and churches. And we can get a little into that later. But if you're a bivocational pastor, or even, and you could be a business owner, that I know business owners who have started churches, you have a double blessing because now you know the full spectrum. And please look at what God has given you as far as a business and the blessings that he's given you through that, whether it be customers or employees. And don't use it as a means to an end to have the congregation support you.
Right.
Because you have something unique that most people never will ever look at. And I know that there's pastors out there who are called not to take money from the congregation, but to have their own businesses. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So it really depends on what's God calling you to do in that particular area. But as far as businesses go, I think, you know, and this is the way I look at it, is we all speak a different language. Business owners, pastors, we all speak a different language, and God has used each one of us in our own capacity to be whom he wants us to be. And a lot of times, you know, I know that you've got a guy sitting in church, and he's running, you know, a multi-million-dollar business, and he's sitting in church and says, okay, what can I do? And so he's looking at, what can I do here at church? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that you can't be a leader until you're a follower. So follow your pastor, help him, but also come to the realization that God has given you a mission. and your mission is, if he's giving you a business and you're trying to run it to glorify him, and if you don't know what that means, then that'll be another day, another time. But then do that. That's what God's called you to do. He didn't call you to be stuffed into a box from your pastor or church, because I go to church here. I have to run the men's ministry. Well, maybe you don't. Because here's the real reality of it, and I know that I'll probably get a lot of pastors ticked off at me, but that wouldn't be the first time, so we'll be good with that.
Well, I should also throw in there, you're also an elder at your church, so it's not that you're not involved in ministry, because you are.
Well, yeah, we do marriage, we do family, we do finances, so it's not like, that I'm sitting on the sideline saying you ought to do this and you ought to do this. And really God has called me to do what I do, not complaining about what everyone else does do or doesn't do. But, so let me tell you, this is one of the best stories that I've heard. And a business owner goes to his pastor, and I've seen it happen a lot, where he goes, I really feel like God has called me to ministry. And his pastor's one of those smart guys, and goes, not a smart aleck, but a smart guy. And he goes, well, can I ask you a few questions? And he goes, oh, absolutely. He goes, how many employees do you have, that you want to say? He said, I've got 500 employees. And do they all have families? And he goes, well, yeah. Do they all have family? He said, yeah. So would it be safe to say that you have about 2,000 people you're responsible for? And he goes, well, yeah. And he goes, so let me ask these questions. He says, you want to sell your business? You want to go to seminary for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it takes. Come out, have our denomination give you a church that you may have 200 people that you're going to reach from anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a week. But yet you have 2,000 people that you're touching 40 hours a week. He goes, I think that God has given you the ministry. You just need to recognize it and do something with it.
Right.
And I think that, we get caught up a lot of times in, business isn't church. Well, it isn't. And church isn't business. But that doesn't mean that God didn't create it.
Right.
And if you really, there's one of my other get you mad things. First of all, God created work. Told Adam to, name the animals. And he stood beside them. Then he created business. Then he created the law. And then he created the church. It wasn't the other way around. So, here's an interesting thing I learned from a Jewish rabbi. On each day on creation, God said that it was good. And on the seventh day, he said it was very good. But the eighth time that God used the word good was in Genesis 2:12, and he said, the gold in this land is good. So I think money's good. So there's so much that could be had. And, if you have a business and you are, like I have a friend that has a business, 25 years, and they have a huge ministry within that business. They have Bible studies. They have to do counseling. They do so much in the community. My take is, God's working there.
Right.
So why don't we, as the body, come alongside the business owner who has an ongoing ministry and say, well, how can we help support God's ministry? Not my ministry as the pastor, or your ministry, as a business owner, but how can we support God's ministry? How can we make it better? They always say that, go where God is working and join him instead of asking them to join you in what you think you should do.
Right. Well, some of the concepts that you're talking about here, you actually really brought to my attention when you said, hey, you need to get a copy of this book and read it. It's called Beyond Business by Lonnie. How do you say his last name? Do you know?
Grenier, I think.
Grenier,
yeah.
Beyond Business, how your company can build a better world. Lonnie is a former pastor who is a business owner. And as he would say, he's still a pastor. He just doesn't have a church congregation as we think of.
Right.
But how he runs his business is as a ministry. And the reason why we're bringing this up, guys, if you're a regular listener of Contractor Secret Weapon and you're like, hey, now you guys are going off into this whole, Christian ministry pastor thing. Well, it's because you, as a business owner, can impact a lot of people. So, like, one of the things I really like that he brought out in that Lonnie brings out in this book, Beyond Business. And by the way, if you are a Christian or a pastor at all, right? Either way, I would highly recommend you get a copy of Beyond Business and read it. I've been listening to it on Audible for a while. It's one of those books that is, for me, freed me up as a business owner to go, okay, I am doing the right thing, and I can serve God as a business owner, not feel guilty about making money, and also to think about, okay, how do I handle my employees? How do I handle my clients? If God were running this business, how would God do it? Like, how would God treat his employees? How would God treat his clients? And taking that kind of mentality and looking at it. And I think if you're a contractor, it really benefits you to look at your business that way and ask yourself those tough questions, because it can give you freedom when you start to see what you do as more than just work, as more than just an income, but as a ministry. And to really sing this point home, think about the effect it has on your community when you have a business. Since we do the Contractor Secret Weapon, let's say someone's a roofer, right? They got a roofing business, and you got to buy supplies. So when you buy supplies to take care of your client, you're now helping out all those other businesses that you're buying supplies from, right? The roofing companies, the shingles, the distributors, all of that, their employees. Like, by doing business, by actually acquiring product that you then turn around and sell for a value, an additional value to someone else, because now you're the one that's actually applying it to the roof or, doing whatever it is that you need to do. And you've got employees, and think about the lives that are then touched, that they're able to then, buy their homes, pay their mortgages, put food on the table. When they put food on the table, they go to the store, they buy the food, which then is going back and helping the farmer who's growing the food, or, the herder who's herding the cattle, or whatever they're called, shepherds. I don't know what they're called anymore. Right? But you have this huge impact on your community in business. And one of the things that I really liked what Lonnie brings out in the book Beyond Business is he talks about millennials. And as someone who's been working with church planners and pastors for years now, and doing the Church Planner podcast for the last 7 years, running Church Planner magazine, like, the millennials are that one generation that is really hard for pastors to get in touch with. And the one thing that we know about millennials, and he brings this up in the book, is millennials are really concerned about, how do we do socially right things with our business? You got like Tom's, who I think it is, someone buys a pair of shoes from them, and they donate a pair of shoes in Africa to, people who need shoes. They want to do these kind of things. They want to be involved with these endeavors that help their communities, that help other communities, not just theirs, but just help people who need the help.
And there's an interesting thing. I've read a bunch of articles, is that millennials, in a large part, are leaving the church.
Yeah.
They're not leaving God, but they're leaving the church. And one of the reasons is because of the social aspect. They want to make a difference. But they're astute enough to move to places that are making a social impact, and are doing it fiscally responsibly, where a lot of times the church isn't.
Right.
They're just dumping money.
Right.
But a lot of these, so there's a lot of things. I was reading Os Guinness's book to call. And he goes, he says, there's a lot of things wrong with the church. He says, but the good thing about it is that it can all change. So there's change that needs to happen everywhere in everybody's life. There's no one thing that's going to happen, but except the one thing is us. It's our responsibility,
Right.
As business owners, as Christians or followers of Christ. Forget about the Christian aspect. As followers of Christ, to be responsible and to further His kingdom. And so what does that look like? I ask some pastors every once in a while, and I'll say, to drive this point home, business and churches, if the church here at your address ceased to exist tomorrow, what kind of effect, if any, would it have on the local community? And they'll go, well, I said, no, not the congregation. I said the local community. But then you take, I have he's not going to listen to this, so I'll brag on him. I have a friend that's a roofer, and we've talked a lot about him the past 25 years, and I've asked him this question. I said, let me ask you a question. If your business, because we were having a conversation about whether, he's going to retire or sell his business or whatever, and I says, you can't sell your business for multiple reasons, but I says, let me ask you this question. If your business ceased to exist tomorrow, what effect would it have on the community, if any? He goes, what? And I said, that's a rhetorical question. I said, I already know the answer. I said, you have set such a precedence for Christ over the past 25 years in this community. They know who you are. They respect you. And that is brought in business because of your values, the way you treat your employees, the way you treat your vendors, the way you treat your customers, the way you treat everybody. They know that it's Christ coming through you. I said, if you company cease to exist tomorrow, it would leave a huge hole in the marketplace that Satan would fill in an instant. So now take a look at what would happen if Hobby Lobby ceased to exist tomorrow. What kind of a hole in the marketplace would they, a company that gives away 50% of their pre-tax profits for the furtherment of the kingdom in various organizations. So there's a big scale and then there's a little scale. What would happen tomorrow if I cease to exist? What am I doing? What can I do? And I can always do something more, something better, but there again, it's not what I want to do necessarily. It's what, God's called me to do. So really, if you feel like you've been called to business, that is awesome. Don't ever be afraid of that because God called you. Just like He called your pastor to be the pastor of His church. He called you to be the pastor of your business. Be it. And how do you do that? Well,
and I think too, when you look at the impact that a business owner will have during the course of the week versus what a pastor will have, because they have a Sunday service, maybe they got some small groups that they run, or maybe a Wednesday night service, that kind of a thing. And in most of our churches in America, not so much in our church plants, but in most of the established churches in America, it's kind of like pastors are like, oh, great, you're a business owner. Awesome, man. Maybe we can get some good tithe from this guy.
Yeah.
Right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. Yes, where your heart is, your money goes. So we want people's heart to be aligned with God and be like, yeah, this is what I want to help. But the reality is that business owner will come into contact with more people the rest of the week than that pastor will.
Right.
And most of them aren't going to be saved. And most of the people that the pastor surrounds himself with already are Christians, or already know.
Already are, yeah. There's very few out there that will run in groups of non-saved just to be an example. And that's okay. You listen, no matter what, I'm not bashing a pastor because he has a job to do.
No.
God's called him to do it. And the nice thing about the church is that it's organic. It's not like a business. A business is not organic. The church is organic. It continues to grow. It exists because God made it exist.
Right.
But there's so much we can do. Like I talk to a lot of business owners about this particular subject, and their eyes roll. I mean, literally roll when we start talking about money. And they feel that for the most part, their pastor only wants them for the money that they can get. Matter of fact, I had one guy who's a millionaire, and he goes, I just feel like the church is trying to bleed me dry.
Right.
I said, that's sad. And the sad part about it is that it's a poor understanding on both sides of what money is. Because money is good. And I met Lonnie at a conference in, I think, March.
Oh, you met Lonnie? I didn't know that.
I got a chance to talk to him for a few minutes.
Can you hook me up? Because I want to interview him on the podcast.
Yeah, call him. He has a podcast.
Oh, does he? Yeah, I gotta get his.
Yeah.
His
but he is awesome. I said, listen, I just got to thank you. I said, you're the only person's book pretty much that I've ever read that thinks like I do. And he says, good, go write another book. But no, I think it has to do. Here's what I think, and you know, I'm not always right, but I think that if pastors came alongside of business owners who have businesses that are growing because God has ordained them in their business to be pastors of their business, and came alongside of them and says, how can we help you become the best Christian leader that God wants so that you can do the ministry he wants?
Right.
I don't think there'd ever be a money problem.
Right.
But that's, just my thought.
Well, I think too, I mean, Peyton and I talk about this all the time on the Church Planter podcast, that a lot of, like, the way we do church in the Western world is not the way the early church was, and it's not the way it's done in a lot of the world, because, like, you look at a lot of churches in Africa, they can't afford to pay a pastor. Like, that's not even a thought. Like, there was it's never been a, hey, you know what, we're gonna start this congregation over here. Everyone's gonna bring a little bit of rice, a little bit of chicken, a little bit of whatever, and that's how the pastor's gonna get their income. Like, a pastor goes into that knowing, I have to get my income somewhere else.
Right, I have to work.
Right, I gotta make money.
Well, Paul worked. Every one of the disciples had a job. When I had a job, they had a business.
Yeah,
Jesus chose business owners to be.
And it was also the society back then, right? I mean, there wasn't employees. There wasn't.
No, you were either a business owner or you were a slave. That was pretty much
so
it.
It's a little bit different in that sense, but. One of the things that Lonnie brings out in the book that I thought was a really good point, it was like an eye-opener for me, is he goes, notice right after Jesus is crucified, they go back to fishing. He goes, it wasn't like they could put their boats in storage or their nets in storage.
I was just going to bring that up.
Business. It was a family-run business, right?
And it never, and they didn't, and when Jesus said to them, follow me, they dropped their nets and they followed him. They didn't shut down their businesses.
Right.
We have this thing that, they followed Jesus. Well, yeah, they followed Jesus, but they were business owners, and the businesses more than likely could take care of their business, their household, without them being there, because the last miracle, they went back to their boats and they went fishing. Like you said, you can't rent it out for the week. That was 3 years later. Their boats would have been dry docked. Their nets would have been rotted. If the businesses
Can you imagine if they'd had Uber for fishermen back then?
Yeah,
they could have. Yeah.
They didn't
come
have all
on
that
boat
stuff
for a day.
And and think about it. From the aspect that Jesus was born into a business family. He wasn't born into a pastor's family or a priest's family. And the interesting thing that Lonnie brought about was that, he probably had to feed up to eight people. And because he took over the business because his dad had died early.
Right.
And he was the head of the household. So, he had a business that was running fairly well that he could take off for 3 years and do ministry that his father told him to go do.
Right.
There's a lot of things we overlooked at it, but so that's one of the reasons that I'm putting together a study to go through the Bible through business eyes and see a lot of the things that we normally don't look at because things are spiritualized that sometimes they shouldn't be.
Right. Well, I mean, I think Paul's also another good example because we always think about Paul and we're like, well, he wrote more books in the New Testament than anyone else. I mean, he gave us all this great wisdom and, he was like this massive church planner and he goes out there and he starts all these churches and it's like, yeah, but he also ran a business.
Yeah.
And he ran a business that he could take from city to city. And think about where you would set up shop. You're going to set up shop and you're right next to the next guy and he's got his business. And at this time, there aren't any other Christians, right? I mean, this is a budding new thing. And he's got to talk to them and make friends with them. And people are starting to get converted because he's a businessman in the middle of a city and he's doing his deal, but he is who he is. Like he's still Paul.
Right.
A follower
but
of Christ.
He did everything in the marketplace.
He did it all in the marketplace.
And when if you go through Acts, it says that he started going into the synagogues and they pretty much booed him out.
Right.
So they went back into the marketplace.
Right.
It's very interesting, when you start looking at it through business eyes and then think about, well, what could a kingdom business be? And that, for the past 2 years, I've been looking at that, and it's really very provocative, very mind-bending. We want to be followers of Christ. We want to do things the right way, but we have a tendency to follow the world's way to run God's business. So we can look at that some other day too.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a seminar on that.
Dude, why not, right?
Why not?
Well, here's the deal, guys. If you've been listening to the Contractor Secret Weapon podcast, you've heard that Dave and I have a program that we're coming out with. We've been telling you guys about it for a while. Now is the time for you to basically see if this is right for you. And what we're going to be doing is going through our 9 steps in detail. We're going to be doing this over a 3-month period, basically 3 weeks each month. We're going to go in depth on each of the 9 steps to set up your business. If you want to know what those 9 steps are, head on over to cswsolution.com. That stands for Contractor Secret Weapon Solution.com. It is in the show notes, so you can see it down there. If you are from the Church Planner podcast and you're thinking, hey, I want to know more about that. I got my own business or I'm self-employed or I want to get into business. Go check that out as well. It might be something for you and your business. You're going to have to talk to me on the phone anyway to find out if it's right for you. So again, that's cswsolution.com. And of course, one of the things that we like to do here on the Contractor Secret Weapon Solution, and it's something that we'll be starting here shortly with the Church Planner podcast, is if you want to get a transcript of today's episode, all you got to do is you text the number 318, because this is episode 318 for Contractor Secret Weapon. So you just text the numbers 318 to this phone number, 850-990-2020. 850-990-2020. That'll be the first thing in the show notes. So if you didn't catch that, just look in the show notes, text 318 to that number, and it will send you the transcript of this particular episode, so you've got it. And then go check out cswsolution.com. See if it's something that you need to consider for your business. If you really want to take your business to the next level here in 2020, like we talked about last week, it's insane to think that you're going to have different results if you don't change, right? That's insanity. So it's time to make that move. It's the beginning of a new year. It's time to do something different. So again, go to cswsolution.com. Any final thoughts from you, Dave?
No, I'm just excited. It's going to, this year's over, closing it out, and we're starting up a new year, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
That's it.
No, I'm not. Wait, I said that wrong. I'm excited to make things happen.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be a fun year. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another great episode. Talk to you then.
Hey, do you want to do
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.